Bond. The 3 is gone. Jane on the outside after Colin Bond, but it's Bond first. And Bond has a long lead as they go for the first of 163 times up Mountain Straight.
So watch his approach to this corner. Very, very smooth indeed. And now the wide open sailors. Colin Bond, runner-up to Alan Moffat in last year's Harley-Corrado, goes after pole position.
Fantastic, naturally gifted race car driver.
This is only third lap, and already it is neck and neck, side by side. It is Bond who's got the better gearing and has more acceleration, and it is Brock who's behind, who's closed on them both.
Him and I drove together in the 1976 Bathurst race.
Alan Grice into the pits, and he'll be handing over to co-driver Colin Bond.
We drove together in an STP car at Bathurst. Whether it be wet, dry or drizzly or whatever, I guess his background on dirt helped. I think it gives you a good feeling of car control.
Here comes Colin Bond. A good line in and a good line out. A good time to Colin Bond.
And he's done it 2:20.87, so he's beaten Moffat.
A fantastic bloke. You'd hear a huge laugh in the pit area somewhere, and Bondy was always in the middle of that.
Old-timers disease comes back to Lakeside. Colin Bond, fantastic to see. Last corner coming up now as Colin Bond does it 2 from 2.
I don't think anyone could end up with any on-track dramas with Bondi. He's such a nice guy, he'd just laugh and forget about it.
Bond is still in front. He's got this perpetual red shadow behind him, number 7 in the Ron Hudson car.
Amaru Park, as a young bloke, would watch him pretty much each weekend that he was there in HTB Toronto.
For Colin Bond, first place in this final round of the Sun 7 Gold Medal Series.
Beautiful car control.
Well, he's certainly as smooth as Moffat, and if anything, he seems to be trying a little harder. That is at all possible because Moffat put everything into his one lap time car.
Great memories of Colin. Very, very talented guy.
Welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us once again. Shannons Legends of Motorsport is the program. We're at Mount Panorama Bathurst at the National Motor Racing Museum, surrounded by some extraordinary machinery, cars and bikes. And again today we chat with another Australian motor racing hero, and we're very much looking forward to that one. We've got a couple of guys to help tell the story. We have Aaron Noonan and Mark Osler with us as well today. Give them a round of applause. Muscle car experts, they know their stuff. Our guest today is a genuine legend. He's done it all. An Australian touring car champion, a Bathurst winner and a 3-time Australian rally champion. We threatened to have him on the program earlier in the series. We've got him today. Please welcome Colin Bond.
Bobby, thanks. Yeah.
Grab a seat.
Great to see so many people here, by the way.
Fantastic. It's a very passionate audience. There's a lot of interest in the program and this location, Bathurst.
It's always good to come to Bathurst, Neil, I think, and to come here and see so many of the old cars which we've all raced and ran or competed against as well, you know. It is fantastic.
I don't know whether it's the same for you, but I always find when you drive down Panorama Avenue and you look at the sign on the hill, there's something that happens to the heart rate. You definitely get a blip, don't you?
Well, you do, and I don't think any of us actually go past Bathurst without doing a lap, you know. Even if you're on your way to Adelaide or something.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. Wow, you've done a lot of motor racing at a very high level over a long period of time, but I want to roll you all the way back 49 years ago to your very first Bathurst in, of all things, an Isuzu Bellette. Now that was a weapon.
Actually, it was an old rally car. We've been rallying, and Trelaw, who owned the car, you know, said, "Oh, let's go to Bathurst," you know. So we just loaded it up and away we went. I mean, in those days, it wasn't a very fast motor car, being 1600 cc's, had a drum brakes all round.
But by the time you got to 1969, you're now in a Holden and in a winning position, and we've got a little piece of that race.
There's your number 1 man at the moment, coming round through the top of the skyline and down into the S's car, 44, Colin Bond's Holden. And just let's watch him for a moment as he streaks down there with about a 58-second lead over Bruce McPhee. He's certainly not pushing the car over much at any rate. He's certainly not taking off the way that Bruce took off as he left the pits here and surged into Hardy-Ferrodo corner. If he doesn't know by now that he's got this 58-second lead, he certainly will as he goes past the pits.
'69 Holden dealer team.
Yep.
Harry Firth, who sadly we lost earlier this year. 350 Monaro, I mean, you look at the cars now, and they're big and heavy, and lurching is a very different thing.
Well, the thing is that they were series production motor cars as well, don't forget, so the brake systems on them weren't that flash, you know, when it came to doing the distance we had to do in those days. And you had to nurse the car because it was the old story, you know, to finish first you must finish. And it was one of the things you had to sort of stroke the car along, but we're always up the front. And that was also the year that Ford Motor Company came along, you know, with the race tyres, and they sort of ended up having a problem with their race tyres, and their cars kept on, you know, falling over. I think except for Alan Moffat's, you know, but he had a problem on the first lap, thank God, and we got rid of him that way, you know.
Talk to me about Harry Firth.
Oh, look, Harry was a remarkable person in his own right, and I think he was a lateral thinker in the beginning. And he had a lot of very good motor cars that he built himself, and a lot of stuff he did for Ford Motor Company, both in rallying and both in racing. And when Al Turner came on from Ford to take over, and Harry sort of got the flick, and Holden picked him up. And as history goes on, like, you know, we came first, Peter Brock came third that year, sorry, you know, with Desi West. And it was probably the last time that a touring car race would have been won at Bathurst on sort of radial tyres, you know. After that, it was all race tyres.
Yeah, it was a much more dedicated process technically, wasn't it? We're going to take our first break on the Shannons Legends of Motorsport. Colin Bond is our special guest. After the break, we're going to talk more about the Holden dealer team years, and we'll go to the break and celebrate that 1969 victory with Colin.
We'll settle this for you in just a moment. Whatever it is, Colin Bond.
Well, the people are moving out into the cheers are going on down here. People are waving their arms and shaking their hands as car 44D, Colin Bond's car, goes flashing past him. But who knows? We haven't seen a flag wheel, have we?
Obviously it was waved, though.
And there it is. Colin Bond in the Holden, who's driven a magnificent race here this afternoon.
This is from the front seat of one of the leading contenders, the GTR XU1. Colin Bond driving. This is Reed Park coming towards McPhillamy Park, up on the highest part of the circuit.
Right, these are continuing left-hand sweepers where you position yourself back out onto the right-hand side of the road, and there's a left-hand blind corner over this particular crest. We've just taken flat out in top gear. It's close on 100 miles an hour.
And at 100 miles an hour, we're approaching the most frightening part of the course. Here comes Skyline.
That was a very early version of race cam. It was Evan Green alongside you, and you doing the full description back in the black and white era in the XU1. That was pretty wild.
Well, I don't know. It was pretty slow, I thought.
But just an interesting concept that you guys had decided to do it even as far back as 1970. XU1 was a bit of a giant killer, and you did 3 years in a row as a solo driver in the race. That was a big undertaking.
Well, I guess we could do it in those days, and 500 miles or whatever it was, you know, was nothing when we were rallying, because, you know, we'd rally all night. So, yeah, I just liked it that way, and occasionally, or later on, we had to obviously have co-drivers. That did come out a bit later.
And after the XU1 came a new body shape and a V8 in the form of the L34 Tyrannus. So let's have a look at Bondy in an L34.
Let's watch him though. The field goes towards the start, and he is past Brock, who made a bad start, and is backing towards Bond. It's Bob Jane on the outside after Colin Bond, but it's Bond first, and then on the outside of the big Falconer going hard was Bobby Jane, and Bond has a long lead as they go for the first of 163 times up Mountain Straight. And the Falcon of Goss showing its great power there as it goes out after Bond.
That's the way to do it. Lead away, and on the opening lap from the start, blaze off into the distance.
They should have finished it then.
That's right. Need to stop at the end of Mountain Straight. One of the things that I always recall is you having something of a special relationship with Amaroo Park. You did a lot of racing there over a long period of time. You were the president, I think, of the Australian Racing Drivers Club, the ARDC, at one stage. So you did an awful lot of mileage there, and very successfully.
I think so. I liked a lot of racetracks. I was, you know, Sydney based, so I used to do most of the Sydney races, the Oran Parks and the Amaroos, where Peter now that, you know, was doing most of the Melbourne ones basically, but that was the way it was in those days.
And we've got a little slice of Amaroo Park action here as well, and this one is from a long way back in the vault. Have a look at Colin in action here.
Bond is still in front. He's got this perpetual red shadow behind him. Number 7 in the Ron Hodgson car is Bob Morris, who pulls out and makes a move, but Bond blocks that fairly effectively and quite legitimately. Comes and takes for himself the better line, goes over the top of the crest, and they've got themselves an escort to pass now, which is quite interesting, because if he puts himself in the wrong place, either Bond or Morris could be in trouble. Colin Bond, though, has been through Chesterfield, one more curve to go, and he's won the race.
That's the situation for Colin Bond, first place in this final round of the Sun 7 Gold Medal Series, and for the third time, first place in the series for the year.
That little car was well matched to that racetrack, but you know, when I look at that vision of Amaroo Park, I think, what on earth were we all thinking back in the day when you used to drive down to that stop corner with a concrete wall and the rock behind it and at huge speed?
Absolutely, but I mean, that's when motor racing was dangerous, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. It's just the way it was, wasn't it? It's quite extraordinary. We're going to take a break now on the Shannons Legends of Motorsport. When we come back, we'll talk to Colin about the Moffat years, but we'll go to the break with some great stuff from here at Bathurst in 1975.
Let's see, it's side by side. Bond is going a little later. He'll take a very difficult line on the outside. Moffat is not going to let him through. In fact, he closes up again because he knows he's got the line and he's going to shoulder Colin Bond out of it if he possibly can. And now it's all acceleration up to the line. This is only third lap, and already it is neck and neck, side by side. Imagine the cheer from the crowd. It is Bond who's got the better gearing and has more acceleration, and it is Brock behind who's closed on them both. But first in this time, and being so close to Bond's nose, is Moffat around the bend, and now Alan Moffat leads the race, and Peter Brock pulls out and decides that he might like to lead for a change, and he goes up on the outside of Colin Bond. Well, indeed. Quite 3 1/4 laps, and look at the distance between these cars. It's a real race, and Brock is the one who wants to get to the lead.
Hey, ladies, this guy will run away with your heart and your purse because he's a real knockout.
So it's the two Fords in front. Then Alan Grush and John Harley in the first of the official teams. Other visitors in the pits is Rusty French, cheering Falcon and Leo Leonard. He's in the pits at the moment. Alan Moffat in car 1 going through.
Very, very high retirement rate. Well, not so much a retirement rate, but a very high incident rate at this stage.
Welcome back. This is the Shannons Legends of Motorsport. Colin Bond is our special guest, and that was 1977, the year of the famous Ford 1-2 with Alan Moffat and Colin Bond. And Bondy, we've all spent a lot of time focusing on the last few seconds of that race, but there was a lot more to it. There was a huge race before that. Just tell us a little bit more about your recollection of the day as it unfolded from your seat.
Well, it was basically, Alan obviously had Jackie X driving with him, and I had Alan Hamilton. And I spoke to Alan Hamilton about, you know, how we should run the race, and he said, look, I haven't driven it long. And I said, look, I could go to halfway, so we did it in quarters in those days. I'll go to halfway, get out, and he'll do one segment, and I'll finish it off. And Alan Moffat decided, he said, no, you should do it in quarters, you know, that's what we're going to do. So anyway, the race started off, and I stopped after a quarter, got back in, out I go, and then Moffat's car came out, and I thought X was in the car. That's what he said. And I'm get going, and I thought, God, this X is pretty good. You know, he's only driven about 10 laps in the car, and he's, you know, on it. And so I waved it past. And lo and behold, Alan's still in the car. So I thought, oh, bugger. Anyway, and then obviously we were both, you know, sitting in the caravan in those days, no motorhomes, you know. Well, the other two drivers were out driving around, you know, and then we both got in and did the last stint. But it was, everything just ran to plan that particular year. We could, and as it finished up, you know, Alan's car was a little bit sort of slow at the end, but we had that much of a gap on the next person, didn't worry us, and we had the finish that everyone now talks about.
And on that topic, everybody does talk about it. Is that just an endless conversation for you? Is that something that people in motorsport just constantly talk about?
Look, I think, Neil, it was probably one of the very first type of finishes like that in Australia. So therefore it was quite unique in its own period, and the fact that, you know, you had two cars going down the straight side by side, you know, and then even though I was on there and he was on the outside, you know, and he still came first and I came second.
It's synonymous, isn't it, that it's a Moffat Bond 1-2. It's almost treated as an equal win in the sense of the way everybody respects and reveres it. Yeah.
Sure.
So it must have been a special moment in your career. You know, when you look at the body of work and all your achievements, does it stick out as one of the big moments, or are there other things that for you that overtook that?
No, I think that was one of the big moments, but I think also that, like Bathurst being Bathurst, we had the opportunity to win it on other occasions when we've had a fan belt come off the car because we're leading by a long way, like this LCD4 days, and I was taking it a bit easier and there was a bad vibration in the engine at certain revs and the fan belt fell off, and I think that might have been the year that Bobby Morris won or someone else, you know. And a lot of little things like that happen to you over the period of the races, you know, and you think, well, golly, we could have had a lot more wins, you know, had things gone right.
And so therefore, does that make it, frustrating is probably the wrong word, but when there's an opportunity to win and you can't take it for all the right reasons, because you did the right thing in terms of being a teammate and playing the team game, but have you ever looked at it at any point in your career and thought, well, there was another one, an easy one to grab there, or do you just see that in a body of others that are all those fish that got away?
Yeah, no, there was a bit more involved in that. I think when Alan and I were both in the caravan, as I said, you know, while we're having our break, and he suggested, why don't we swap cars when we go back out? And therefore, we'd be both winners, and only a co-drive wouldn't finish. Now, I don't know whether that was going to be legal, because you could cross-enter, but the car had to not break down or not finish, maybe. Anyway, and knocking it back at that particular time, you know, said, no, we came here to come 1-2, I'm sure we can. We'll get back in our own cars and do what we had to do.
Motor racing ifs and buts. That's a very big book, the if and but one. We'll go back to 1977 now, to Bathurst, and have a look at more of Colin Bond in that famous year.
Back at Mount Panorama, we have 14 laps remaining, and still Alan Moffat in front from his teammate Colin Bond, and the two Fords seem to have the race wrapped up. So they have that 2-lap margin, which is a very handy space to have at this stage. Young Jeffrey Brabham just in front of the Colin Bond car. Bond closing gradually, both on Brabham and also on his team leader, who's now down to less than 50 seconds gap. He won't catch Moffat if Moffat is able to continue at his present pace, even though Bond is circulating more rapidly. But it may well be that Moffat elects to slow up to bring his second team car within close range for a ceremonial finish.
Ceremonial finish is one way of describing it. Evan Green in the commentary box. They're just looking at the cars and you compare the imagery to modern racing and they just don't look like they've got any damping control. They look big and heavy and hard to stop. Were they hard to drive?
Probably, they weren't hard to drive, but I think that the brakes were the biggest problem we had. When I say brakes being a problem, we had plenty of brake pressure, but the car wouldn't stop because you ran into these very hard pads. And I remember X getting in the car when he first arrived and he did 2 laps, came in and said, there's something wrong with the brakes. So Moff got in his car and went out and he said, no, there's nothing wrong with the brakes. He said, compared to what you've been driving at Le Mans and Formula One, I said, this is what we've got. So just, you know, and apart from that, I just think that I found them quite easy. Coming from Blitz and things like that, you know, when you get a competitive motor car like the Monaro and that, they were very good.
Take a break again now on the Shannons Legends of Motorsport. After the break, more of Colin Bond's amazing motorsport career. And we'll go to the break with some classic vision from the 1978 shootout with Colin in the Ford Cobra.
Here he comes, Colin Bond, the second of the Moffat Ford dealer team drivers to try and qualify to gain pole position. He's really trying up through here too, Evan. Watch the front of the car dipping and bobbing as he absolutely puts the throttle right to the floor and tries this tremendous climb up the mountain. Well, he's certainly as smooth as Moffat, and if anything, he seems to be trying a little harder. That is at all possible because Moffat put everything into his 1 lap time trial.
A little drier under those hills than we saw with Moffat, so he may have had just a marginally improved run through there. Now at the top, Moffat went through in 120. Colin, I got it 119.7, so he's about 0.3 better at that stage. So a very good climb up the hill by Colin Bond.
Well, here comes Colin Bond. A good line in and a good line out. A good time to Colin Bond.
And he's done it 2:20.87, so
they can make their way through this gaggle of overlap cars. Steve Masterton has the headlights on and Colin Bond just sitting there waiting to strike. Bondy plays rear guard quite well. Many years of, well, one good season of doing it for the Another Ford team.
And a Holden team.
That's right. You've got to be versatile to be rear gunner in this production car racing.
Shannons Legends of Motorsports, the program. Colin Bond is our special guest. That was 1981 at Amaroo Park, the Masterton Capri. You drove for Steve and Jim Masterton for 3 successful years, but a really big departure from being a Holden dealer team driver and driving with Alan Moffat in the Moffat Ford dealers.
Yes, but after that, I think, Neil, we ran the Ford Rally program, you know, with Ford, which took us into some time. And then, you know, there was a Thompson Ford we drove here at Bathurst with Frenchie after the Moffat days. And then really we sort of went to, because that Amaroo Park, that was a 3.5 litre series that they had, and we're doing that, and then they ran them at Bathurst at Nings' class, of course. But, you know, after that we did come back and drive for some other manufacturers as well.
Meandering further through the years, by the time you got to 1983, you've now paired up at Bathurst with another legend, Alan Grice, in the STP Holden Commodore, and that was a year that yielded a podium for you. You got a third position out of that. And the other thing that you begin to notice when you look over the stats of the industry is the swirl that's taking place as different relationships are changing. Once rivals are now teammates.
Yeah, look, that was a really good car, except we were experimenting with some brake fluid, which didn't work towards the end. And I know that we had to sort of pump the brakes about 4 times to get a pedal, you know, and going at Skyline and things like that, it was fairly hairy. But third place, as it turned out, wasn't bad. We probably could have done better if we didn't have the brake problem. But yeah, I mean, well, Alan was obviously a very good driver as well, and, you know, had many Bathurst under his belt. But they were good days.
And we've got a pit stop from that 1983 race where we've got Colin taking over from Alan in the STP Commodore.
Here comes Alan Grice into the pits, and he'll be handing over to co-driver Colin Bond. Got a wall of cars in there, but here comes Grice in number 6. Let's see how quick the pit stop is as we start our timer. Bond trying to help Grice out of the car.
Their lead was 16.8 seconds when they went into the pit. They've now lost the lead. Morris has gone past.
Still working on the changeover there.
Moffat has gone past. Brock has gone past in 25.
The rhythm of the pit stops in those days just seems so much different to what we've become accustomed to. One of the things we really love about these shows is the opportunity for us to be able to talk about some amazing machinery that is not only in this National Motor Racing Museum, but scattered around the country in a variety of places. And the man that tells the story best is Mark Osley.
Thanks, Neil. And it's great to be standing here with a beautiful race replica of the HK GTS 327 Monaro that was driven to victory at Bathurst in 1968 by Bruce McPhee and Barry Mulholland. The reason why they built a replica was because the original race-winning car disappeared, but it still captures the essence of that incredible showroom stock series production racing era at Bathurst when Bondi really started to hit the big time in the late 1960s. You know, back in those days, the old saying, win on Sunday, sell on Monday, really meant something, because the car you saw win at Bathurst on Sunday, you could go down to your local car dealership the next day and buy exactly the same make and model. It really worked. Back in these days, a lot of the cars that competed in the race were road registered, so they were driven up to Mount Panorama to run them in. And if they managed to get through the race without too much damage or injury, they were also driven home as well. Extraordinary compared to today's motorsport. This was the first of General Motors Holden's Australian muscle cars, and it was loaded with traditional muscle car gear. 327 cubic inch Chevy V8 engine, Saginaw 4-speed gearbox, the big 10-bolt GM posi traction limited slip diff in the back, incredibly skinny tyres, almost as wide as you see on motorcycles these days, and the gun drivers used to buff the treads right down to make them work even better and last longer. You know, back in those days, it was a real juggling act driving these sort of cars over 500 miles. If you went too fast, you'd break the car, but if you went too slow, you'd lose. It really required a mix of mechanical sympathy and controlled aggression, and Colin Bond certainly had that in spades when he and Tony Roberts got together in a car very similar to this one in 1969 and won the Bathurst 500.
Thanks, Mark. Well done.
Versatile was a word that Mike Raymond used in describing you a little bit earlier in the broadcast, and you were. I can recall you driving Formula 5000 car of Frank Maddish's at one stage. We talked earlier about the rally championships, and that's an extraordinary tale in itself, and a whole variety of other things. You just seem to be one of those fellas that can climb in and out of different cars, different disciplines, different surface conditions, and excel.
Well, I don't think I'm the only one that can do that, Neil. I think it's just, you look at what you've got to do as far as the conditions, and you drive to the conditions. I think the rallying, I really liked. I enjoyed the rallying only because I think in rallying, when you're on the dirt in particular, if you really try, you know, like 10-10 stuff, you actually went faster. Whereas motor racing, sometimes you do that and you go slower. You know, motor racing to me was a bit more of a science. You sort of were quite smooth, braking, doing the same thing every lap after lap after lap, you know.
With your rally driving, was this something that you did naturally as a driver, or were you using notes at the time, which is what happens in the modern era where there's pace notes and drivers are often working to a flight plan, not what they can see?
No, we never had notes whatsoever, you know, and I think that what you see is what you do with, you know, and I think it was a much safer period, you know, because apart from Bathurst here, I think in '73 when I went upside down, apart from that, I don't think I've actually been upside down. And when you consider the number of miles we did, you know, both rallying and racing and hill climbing and off-roading, all that type of thing, you know, so I just think that, what can I say? It was something you adapt to, you know.
Where I was going with that, I guess, is trying to work out how much of it was innate. You know, is it just in your skill set, the palm of your hands, the seat of your pants, to be able to feel and understand a motor car versus someone that takes it in a deeply analytical process?
I think so. I think there are natural drivers. I think I'm probably one of those. You know, and there are people that actually work at it, which are another sort of motor racing driver. But I guess I started at motor car days in car clubs, and you're sort of in out the witches' hats and doing handbrake turns. And then you went rallying, it was the same sort of thing, only a bit faster. And then you went racing, and it was the same sort of thing, only a bit faster again.
Opportunity now for another quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Alfa Romeo years with Colin. He touched on the different manufacturers that he's driven for, and we'll go to the break with a little bit more of that versatility. 1984, Sandown, the World Endurance Championship, and in a sports car.
While the all-conquering Porsche team had already wrapped up the manufacturer's endurance title, two of their drivers, Stefan Belloff and Jochen Mass, both of Germany, were set to battle it out for the Drivers' Championship, against a very strong field that included the likes of this year's Le Mans winner, Frenchman Henri Pescarolo, teamed with Klaus Ludwig and Paul Belmondo. Local interest set it on the appearance of some of our best drivers, including Alan Grice and Dick Johnson in the Recar Chev Monza, Colin Bond and Andrew Medicki in a Porsche 956 entered by Bob Jane, with Victorian Rusty French, who finished 8th at Le Mans earlier this year, linking with Formula 1 daredevil Manfred Winkelhock. Plugging away steadily was Australian Rusty French, who backed up his strong Le Mans efforts by assisting Winkelhock into 5th place outright, following a late race tussle against Bond and Medicki, who justified the faith shown in them by Bob Jane with a strong 6th outright.
So Colin Bond still tagging there at the Ralliart Starion of Kevin Bartlett as they head up over Motorcraft, having their own personal scrap.
1985. And that was Barbagallo Raceway, Wanneroo, and Colin in the Alfa Romeo in a battle there with Kevin Bartlett in the Mitsubishi Starion. So this was a big change. We've now gone to Group A, a terrible name, but basically meant international touring car racing. You pulled together that deal with Alfa Romeo, had Alan Jones as a teammate. It was a big project.
It was, but I think it was fantastic having Alan because he was on his way back to Formula 1.
Well, it was in between for him, wasn't it?
It was, you know, and he was going to go to Beatrice just after that. And he was fantastic to drive or have as a co-driver or a team manager because he was so good in the car because he was back at his best. And I've often said to people, like, they underestimate how good Alan really was because not many people in Australia saw him when he was at his peak. But he was fantastic.
Well, it's a story in itself, and it's probably for another show one day, but he fundamentally gave it away too early with Williams, didn't he? Probably another world championship or two in him, and then he was disenchanted, came back and had a scoot around with you, and then went back and had another go in those uncompetitive Ford-powered cars.
Yeah, sure, but I think the Alphas were a good car. I mean, they were, again, a class motor car. They weren't an outright car. But in saying that, in Group A, they were still fairly competitive. You know, I think that might have been the year that the Volvo might have won or something. I don't know.
Strong under brakes, great handling, probably not enough snort in a straight line, but still a very impressive car. Let's get to Aaron Noonan now. He's got more from the vault.
Well, Neil, we talked earlier about Amaroo Park in Sydney. I've dug this out from the 7 Sport archives. This is Bondi in action in the Alfa Romeo GTV6 in the old AMS car series, which was the Amaroo Touring Car Championship within the championship. This is Bondi in action up against Gary Wilmington in the Jaguar XJS.
Richards now going in underneath. Can't quite get through there. Hasn't got the legs for it. Oh, twitchy in the tail is Wilmington. Three abreast.
Watch Bond on the outside. The Alfa very strong under brakes. Richards now makes a challenge as they come to the stop corner, but the bulk of the Jaguar wins out. And the big V12 Bond trying to get some traction as he comes out of the stop corner up onto the straight. Look at Bondi through to second.
Great move there from Bondi. Third to second.
Fantastic. Great battle there with you and Gary. He's in the big car and you're monstering him in the Alfa. It was good.
Oh, look, you know, I think that was the thing in the old days. You know, the big cars, eventually the tyres would go away and little cars would come on strong. But, you know, he had a V12, we had a V6, you know, so it was a bit better in the straight lines. But, yeah, they were good days. And the corners up at Amaroo Park, looking at that, were fantastic, weren't they?
We
really
commented when we were watching
corners.
that. Yeah, just the up over the top of the hill and through the series of rights. That right-hander at Mazda corner was a driver's corner, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. I want to move on now to the Alfa 75, the turbo car. I don't have a strong, and I don't think the audience does either, a stronger recollection of this car. Can you just explain a bit about it?
Basically, the 75 was a square-looking motor car, you know, like a normal touring car, I guess. And it had a turbocharged motor in it. And it was reasonably quick in those days. And I know that at Bathurst, we ran it here and it brought the safety car out with Lucio's Aereo, crashed it up the top. So we made history there.
For all the wrong reasons.
For all the wrong reasons, yeah. But look, they were good days. I mean, turbocharging in those days was starting to be new and everyone was learning a bit about it, you know, and it was quite a science, actually.
You must have got it working reasonably well at some stage because we've got something here from the vault in 1987 leading at Amaroo Park.
Colin Bond and the Caltex Alpha leading down to the right-hander. Brian Callahan in 47. Trevor Ashby in the Commodore runs in third. Jimmy Richards is fourth place in the number 3 JPS BMW.
And for the first time this season, we see Colin Bond's Alpha leading a race under race conditions. He did qualify on pole position here, I think, for one meeting at Amaroo earlier in the season, but the car just never has really got up and running under race conditions until now. There's Longhurst struggling to circulate round the track and get back to the pits. He's got a long way to go.
I think Michael Brown and all the folks at Caltex will be wrapped in this side. Colin Bond leads them down towards Mazda corner. Second spot still being held by Brian Callahan, Trevor Ashby and Jim Richards. That's the order as they sweep downhill to the left-hander at Honda.
Great stuff, Colin. The other thing that we haven't really spoken about at all is the fact that there was an Australian Touring Car Championship and endurance racing at the back end of the year, but there was this thing called the AMS Car Series, which was all focused at Amaroo Park, and that was often 4 or 5 round events in its own right.
Oh, absolutely, and it was good racing as well, you know, and I think and televised, which in those days was fairly rare as well. But no, we had really good times there. I just think then we had races between, was it 3 XU1s and 3 Falcons and 3 Valiants or something, you know, and they were very good crash and bash days.
Yeah, that's right, they were. Look, I'd like to take this opportunity to remind everybody about the Shannons Club, where you can create your own virtual garage, discuss topics on Lead to the Break with more of that wonderful little Alpha 75. In 1987, out at Oran Park, the year that Jimmy Richards and Glenn Seaton were in that big finale battle for the championship. Here it is.
Here's a man giving it a heck of a shot too. Colin Bond came off 12th position on the starting grid here this afternoon and has moved up to 7th position rather. Yep, now in 7th spot with Grice pulling off. So the Alpha, which has promised so much this season, is delivering for Colin Bond here this afternoon at Oran Park. Alan Jones, Colin Bond, the number 4 Caltex Sierra.
Jonesy, I think, would be happy, Gary. He doesn't do a great deal of racing in Australia.
He's wanted this race so desperately. I mean, he's not, at the moment anyway, in sight of a victory, but a top 3 finish would be an enormous result. And they're in, the Caltex cars are in 3rd and 5th position. So Bond is another one who's gone through an awfully painful period of development with the Sierras.
Strong year, 1988, partnered with former World Formula One champion Alan Jones, and Gary just made mention in that item there that the development of those cars was tricky in the early years, but you got it right, qualified 6th, finished 3rd that year.
Yes, I mean, they were, how can I say, a bit of a hand grenade, actually. If you kept them under 500 horsepower, they seemed to last, you know. Once you tried to get over 500 horsepower, you split bores and did all sorts of stupid things. And that was the problem with them towards the end, I think, because to maintain being competitive, you just needed to up the boost, up the ante. And they did become a bit unreliable, but they were great when the tyres were new, you know what I mean? And you had plenty of traction.
They were a bit of a beast though, weren't they? Because when the tyres, conversely, were a little old, you can see you guys just wrestling these things constantly.
Around Amaroo Park, for argument's sake, you go 5 seconds lap slower. You know, coming for a brand new set of tyres on, and you go, whoo, how good's this, you know? But they were fantastic, you know, but it was just the tyres needed to be good, you know, and away they went. But of course, what they were, 2 litres, turbocharged, up against everything else, it was not a bad effort.
Well, as time went by, you continued that development and the cars continued to get quicker, ultimately leading to, as every race driver wants, a victory. But we've found one where there's a victory with a twist. Let's get to the vault. Here's Aaron.
Well, Neil, the first rule of modern motorsport is thank your sponsors when you get a win. When Bondi did it in Lakeside in 1990, he thanked the wrong sponsor. Check this out.
Old-timers disease comes back to Lakeside. Colin Bond, fantastic to see. Well done, son.
Thanks very much, Mike. It was as good as it was for me as the people over there in the Castrol, sorry, the Caltex tent. It was fantastic.
Nice find, well caught, Aaron. That's a good one. That, well, you had backing from Castrol in your early years, but right at that particular point in time, it was all about Caltex. So that one was would have made your temperature come up a bit.
Well, a little bit. I mean, they start with C, though, you know. So.
Near enough. I bet the blokes at Caltex didn't think that. The success continued. 1990, you continued to build momentum, which was probably a little bit too little, too late to a degree, because like everybody wants it earlier in this business. But let's have a look here at Malala, just north of Adelaide in South Australia, where once again Colin was very strong, resulting in a win.
You know, age has got nothing to do with ability, Michael. I wish you'd start getting used to this idea.
We're in the same club, pal.
Yeah, we're all in the same club. And remember, Colin and I drove together.
That's true.
I know the aspersions you're casting. He's done a great job here and a superb job for Caltex, who have supported him for many years. When life was not so easy, but he's persevered with his own engines. They build them themselves in Sydney. They've worked on an Australian management system and certainly proving the day here today.
Last corner coming up now as Colin Bond does it 2 from 2 in the Caltex Sierra. He is going to pick up the win here today.
Yet another win for Colin Bond. There's a busy little racetrack out at Malala. We don't go there any longer, but that was a fond memory for you.
No, they are. They were good. And Lakeside too. Yeah, I used to like Lakeside. A bit bumpy, of course, you know, but Lakeside, Malala were good circuits. And, you know, I think looking back at that, we struck on a formula with that particular car at the time where we put the back tyres on the front as well. Because we used to have little tyres on the front and big ones on the back. I don't know why, because they ran them like that in England, I think. And we found that the front tyres would go away after a while, so doing that, and we just sort of a sudden had a very consistent motor car that went for the whole race, and we won Lakeside, then we won that one, so it worked for us. And then I told Ken Seaton about it, I think, and that's and they all used it too, so. Okay.
And that was a place that was hard on rear tyres at Malala, because obviously traction limited out of at least 2 or 3 of those corners in second gear. Bathurst, last run for you here in 1994. You drove for Freddie Gibson and you partnered the late Anders Olofsson. This was now moved back into the V8 era and for you, the end of a long, long line of Bathurst, you recall?
It was, and it was the first time that we'd driven a touring car which sort of had ground effects. You know, they were the cars just coming in with ground effects. And I had to get used to the fact that you could break into the corner and almost to the apex and then get back on the power and go, because the computer said that's what you could do, you know. Up until then, you just drove by the seat of your pants and you braked in a straight line, turned in and used the throttle to get out of the corners. But it was an interesting exercise. We qualified reasonable. We went back a lap at one stage and then we got it back. We actually got to the lead for 6 laps or something or other, you know, then finished, I think, 6 outright in the end. But it was one of those wet, dry periods as well, so who had the right tyres on at the time sort of was a star.
It's a monstrous family album that is Colin Bond's racing career. It's gone on for decade after decade. Are you happy with the work at the end of it all? Do you give yourself a tick when you got to the end?
Oh, I think so. And look, there's not that many sports that you can honestly do for 30-odd years and walk away with it with everything still working, you know. I think, you know, if you're a tennis player, you've got tennis elbow, and if you're a cricketer, you might have a sore back or something like that, you know. And I just sort of felt that that particular period of motorsport was a great time to be involved. We had big cars and little cars. Everyone was good friends. You know, afterwards, after the racing, I should say, you know, you go to the Shell tent or the BP tent and mix with the other drivers. Whereas today, I just think everything's become so professional. Everyone's packing up before the thing's even finished, and the transporters are on their way home, you know, and ready for the next event.
Colin, it's been an absolute pleasure to spend some time with you today. We really appreciate you dropping in, and congratulations on all your fantastic achievements. Well done.
Thank you, Neil.
Round of applause for Colin. Thanks, mate. Hope you've enjoyed the program. Join us again next week. More of the Shannons Legends of Motorsport. Bye for now.
And now Peter Brock on his last lap, enjoying himself, getting a great cheer from the crowd as he goes through.
I grew up watching Brock. He was the icon of motorsport. He was what we all looked up to.
Here it comes, the checkered flag.
And he's just hurling it round.
As the flag drops, I'm probably at my most nervous.
He was excellent and very hard to beat.
The Bathurst King goes out after the mountain again.
It was very much the people's champion.
And there it is. Colin Bond in the Holden.
At 100 miles an hour, we're approaching the most frightening part of the course. Here comes Skyline.
And Bond has a long lead as they go for the first of 153 times up down the straight.
They come down in that magnificent view from the 7 helicopter.
Look at Bond through a second.
The number 4, Caltech Sierra.
Colin Bond, fantastic to see. Well done, son.